We're already having a nice laugh here on the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It is brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation Mental Health Services. You can visit pennfoundation.org. With me, as always, my good friends, Jody, McCloud, Missmer, and Amie, Alanson, Dundon. Ladies, how are we today? Everything good? Ready to roll? Feeling froggy and ready to leap over there?
Yes. Yeah. Good day.
Yes.
We're excited to, be able to talk about what we're talking about today. I think we're going to have a good convo.
Yes, I'm glad we had a good off-air convo because things are about to get a little bit serious around here. Not just on this podcast, but probably all over the place. As we talk about getting along during polarizing times, not really any big event coming up or anything like that for people to focus on, to possibly disagree on. But no, obviously, just kidding. But there is a big event that is coming up, and there is the possibility to agree but disagree and not make it be a difficult situation with someone, whether that's someone close to you, whether that's someone you work with, whether that's somebody, I don't know, on a Facebook comment chat thread or anything like that. But so we have had this conversation before about getting along during polarizing times. That was in August of 2022. Obviously, a big election coming up, an opportunity for a lot of us to have conversations that could be productive is what we're focusing on. Conversations that don't need to go down an uncomfortable road for anybody. So, Amie, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. One of the things that we talked about last time was just the idea of, look, it is the Just Start the Conversation podcast that we do around here. But the choice to have a conversation or to not have a conversation was something that we touched on in our last episode, talking about this topic of polarizing times. Can we go into maybe just knowing your own temperature a little bit in situations like this, knowing that there's some things that might get you a little bit hot under the collar that could make you react in a way that isn't typically quote unquote you. Just a little bit of knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them when it comes to some of these conversations.
Did you just go Kenny Rogers?
He did. He went all Kenny Rogers.
I'm the gambler, baby.
Wow.
So I think I would answer that in a few different ways. The first one would be, before you engage in a conversation with someone about politics, presidential candidates, who you're going to choose to vote for and why, I would say think about what you want to get out of that conversation. What's the purpose of that conversation? Are you just going to start that conversation because you're ready to rumble, right? You just want to argue? Or are you starting that conversation because you're speaking with someone who you think is genuinely invested in a healthy conversation and you can have that conversation? If it's just getting your ideas across to be argumentative and start something with someone, then I would say don't have that conversation, right? We do it all the time in social media, which I think is super interesting. That so I say that to say, if you wouldn't say it to somebody's face, don't write it in social media, because either way you're inciting, maybe inciting other people to get all jazzed up about something, and that wasn't your initial intention. If your intention and your intended audience is receptive to a healthy conversation, then I think it's okay to have. If you have a goal for that conversation, if it's just to shout something to rile people up, then I would suggest that not happen. And you have to know your triggers as an individual. To your point, Crockett, how do you know your temperature? What gets me riled up? Are there people that tend to incite me or rile me up? Maybe I need to stay away from them, or not necessarily spend long amounts of time with that person. Know the things that kind of get me at a place where I'm not at my best. If I'm not at my best, I don't want to have these conversations.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned, we kind of talked about Facebook a time or two here already. Jody, I'm going to go to you. Just this idea of, Amie alluded to kind of don't say something on social media that you wouldn't say in front of someone. The idea of social media in these situations, because look, you're going to get a bigger audience than perhaps, if you're having a conversation with your best friend and you two are disagreeing on something, you probably each know the point in the conversation, be like, all right, like, high five. Let's go back to watching a football game. We're doing whatever we were doing. Get past it. Social media as a platform for these conversations. Can we just kind of go into a little bit of knowing maybe when to engage, not to engage? I think that was a really good point from you, Amie, about a healthy conversation. Chances are the more you open up the field to other people to engage in the conversation, there's a good chance that it's not going to stay so healthy. So just the social media element in all of this, and wanting to maybe have a voice to speak because that is your right, but also knowing that this might not be the best place to do it.
I think you need to ask the question before you post something: why am I posting this? Why am I posting this? Because if you are posting it because you feel that it's important to you, then I agree that you have every right to post that. I think if you're posting that, as Amie indicated, that you're looking for some sort of argument, or you're looking for a fight, if you will, I think you need to take responsibility for that. I am not one to say that you shouldn't say what you want to say, but I do think that you are responsible for what happens after you say it or after you post it. So my first thought is, make sure that you ask yourself the question why you're talking about this, or why it's important for you to put that out there. I personally have started to repost something. I'm not a big Facebook person, but now we know why. There's a story to that, but
it's a different podcast, I'm guessing, but please continue.
Yes, next topic. But I enjoy Instagram. And so sometimes there are things that I see, or reels, and yes, I realize I get them after the TikTokers get them, but I'm not a TikTok person. And I go to repost something, and then I will take it back. Not because I don't believe it, not because I don't think it's absolutely hysterical, but I'm mindful of other people who are going to see it. And I take responsibility for that, because I think at the end of the day, you are only responsible for what comes out of your mouth, or what you put on paper. And so when you're sitting at a family gathering, it's knowing that you are only responsible for your response, and taking responsibility for it. You cannot control the other human being. And when you start to think that you can, I think that's when emotions really start to go. But this is an important. Let's not negate the fact that there are things that are very, very important to people right now that impact their life right now, and people feel the need to share that. But it's not necessarily things that you can share with everybody, not even your best friend. You know, there are things that I don't discuss with my best friend because we don't.
You have to know the people that you're putting it out there with. And some of my best friends may have different political opinions than I do. And so we just don't go there.
Yeah. It's really sad to see when people choose to not be friends any longer. And I'm not even talking about Facebook friends. I'm talking about family members. And number one, I would say, do you traditionally have healthy conversations with that person, even if it's about the weather?
Right.
You know, if this is not someone, your brother, your sister, your mom, your cousin, your neighbor, if you don't historically have healthy conversations, or you don't connect on that level, let's keep it to things that you're able to agree upon. I don't know, length of the grass and the lawn that you share. Although that might be controversial, but
that's another podcast. We got 2 new podcasts on the way here coming up.
But I think, Jody, you made several really good points, and I think, again, one of them is this is our life. We are living in a society where there is a lot of political stress, and to sit here and say, well, don't talk about it, that's unreasonable.
Absolutely unreasonable.
And I think it's important that we all talk about stuff that's important and that's impactful. And it's one of the things that makes the United States great, right? Is
Absolutely.
the fact that we can and do have these conversations. I think it's really important from an emotional, mental health standpoint to take a step back and think about my anxiety level in general today, my depression level in general today. What am I doing to take care of my mental health, so that if I step into a political conversation with someone that's uncomfortable, or I see a post on social media that makes me upset, I have healthy coping mechanisms that I can walk away to, right?
Yeah.
It's important that we are able to manage our physical and mental health in spite of political chaos.
Yeah, you're not going to avoid it.
No.
It's not good. It's unavoidable. And there's always going to be someone out there who has studied or has educated themselves on a level that you haven't. And unless you're willing to hear what they have to say, I would say also, don't start that conversation. So you shouldn't enter into these conversations, in my opinion, again, if you haven't had historical healthy conversations with this person, and if you're not willing, you're going to need to be mindful of when you start those conversations, aside from the emotional
Right.
and that piece. It's unfortunate, and I think we're getting it from every side at this point. You turn on the television, and I think what's really harmful, and this isn't new, is that some things aren't even true. So you're watching television commercials, and if you take them to be true or false, or you're not even getting reality when you're turning on the television. You're getting a skewed view of somebody else's reality. And if that upsets you, I would highly recommend that you stay away from any political conversation. If you can't watch TV and just go, wow, and kind of go back to the football game, that's fine.
Yeah, I think you need to consider your source for your information. Make sure you're getting it from a really trustworthy place in terms of, any candidate's, viewpoint, so that you have facts that are coming from a very trusted, evidence-based, journaled place. And then once you've done that, then I think you're probably in a better position to have those intelligent conversations.
But be prepared, because the other person may have checked their trusted sources and see it differently, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I actually had a situation, funny, not funny story, but I avoided conflict. I was actually on a boat, so it was really good to avoid conflict when you're floating on a boat.
Can't go anywhere.
No. Well,
Kind of trapped.
you can, but
If you can swim, you can.
you can swim.
If you can swim.
But something was said on the boat in response to something in the news today, and one of the individuals on the boat kind of rolled their eyes and said, well, yeah, that happened, and did quotation marks with their fingers. And I took a deep breath to say something, and then I decided I would just exhale and go in the water. Because in that moment, what I was going to say wasn't going to be helpful.
Right.
Read the room or the boat and recognize that what's going to happen
Right.
from that.
And
You
that's
know?
and that's a perfect example of what I said when we opened, to say, what's the goal of this conversation? Is what's going to come out of my mouth going to be productive, or is it just going to make things more stressful and more tense? And I have to be responsible for
Right.
what I say and what that's going to cause.
Yeah. I couldn't change what that person had done or referenced, but what I could do is be very mindful of where I was and what was important. And actually, what was important was enjoying the sunshine and floating on a boat.
Right.
Much like what's important is spending time with family and finishing your turkey. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like recognize what's important in that moment, and it's not this.
110%.
It is not this.
Yeah.
I think to that point, we've kind of talked about this idea of avoiding it. But for a lot of people that may be feeling a lot more stress and anxiety about this upcoming election, there are some people whose, could change a lot about their daily lives with some of the decisions that could ultimately be made as a result of this election. Can we kind of go to the idea of trying to avoid it a little bit? Because like you said, obviously, if you're trying not to engage, Jody, to your point, you felt like it was going to get unhealthy in that conversation, and you almost left someone off of a boat. But you, just that idea of doing what you can to avoid it. And not only that, I think, listen, we have two great mental health experts on this podcast. I'm not one of them. Don't be fooled. Avoiding it, but also there is an outlet to talk. There is a place to go if you are feeling a certain kind of way. So just, Amie, I'll start with you on that. The idea of not being able to avoid it, but avoiding it, and also finding the appropriate outlets that maybe if you're not comfortable having those conversations with ex-family member, ex-friend, whoever this person might be, but that there are outlets for you to let your voice be heard, even if it's just so you can just get something off your chest.
Yeah, I think if your thoughts and feelings are about the election, the campaign, the future in terms of policies is affecting your mental health to the point where you're having some trouble coping, and that could look like angry outbursts or isolation or crying spells or just feeling very kind of detached and I think then you need to have a conversation. It's okay to have a conversation with a trusted family doctor. And again, it seems, well, that's extreme, Amie, to say go to your doctor to talk about politics. I'm not necessarily saying that, although to all my doctor friends, if people start coming to you for that, I guess it's my fault. I think that you need to make sure that your stress, anxiety, depression levels are healthy. And if this is getting you to the point where you are not functioning, it's time to talk to your doctor or a therapist or somebody you trust, right? A trusted health professional to discuss why this is riling you up so much and what's underneath this, what's causing this distress for you, because it's not on the surface level. It's likely not one candidate or the other. It's probably fear.
I was just going to say, I just wrote that down. It's fear.
Yeah, it's fear of the unknown in the future, and it's important to unpack that with somebody.
Yeah, fear is incredibly powerful, and I think we recognize. Let me say that differently. I think that it's important to recognize that individually, you do not control the outcome of this situation individually. And that's scary for some of us who have control issues or for some of us who may, to your point, Crockett, that perhaps we see a particular outcome of this election directly affecting us in a negative way and we want to protect. And that's real, right? Like that's a real fear. And fear is incredibly powerful when it comes to how we respond. We talk about fight or flight. We talk about those pieces. That's what comes out in these scenarios is it's fear-based. And it's not, you're not afraid of the other person. You're afraid of what that outcome could potentially be and you don't agree with it. I think, if we're giving practical sort of statements that people can say when perhaps a conversation comes up, something that I don't do often enough, full disclosure, but I had someone say it to me the other day, and I said something, and the person responded to me with, "It sounds like that's really important to you." That's all they said. I was like, I had my little moment. I was like, ah, and then the person who completely disagreed with me, and I know she disagrees with me, and I probably was looking for a little emotional outlet. She just responded with, "It sounds like that is really important to you." And
was she a therapist?
She is a therapist. She is a therapist, but in the moment she was my friend. But But I thought that was great advice, and I thought, wow, I need to use that for any situation. You know, whether somebody's sharing with me about, I don't know, their kids' playing time on a soccer team, and I'm like, oh, gosh, like, let me give you an opinion. No, they're not looking for an opinion.
Yeah.
They're looking, they want to be heard.
Yeah, and so we use that technique in therapy, and especially with, I'll tell you where that originated from with children and adolescents who are oppositional defiant. So in parenting, we teach how to respond with what I refer to as brain dead statements. Okay.
So do you hear what she's doing here? It's okay. I'm comfortable.
No. Hear me out. So, I don't.
It sounds like.
How do I not engage people?
Sounds like that's really important. No,
it sounds like that's really important to you. Is something that I'm going to say that's going to be really difficult for that person to come back with a heated, incited response. Right?
It was so calming.
It's similar to the response, "I'm sorry you feel that way."
Yeah.
Right. I can reflect and paraphrase. In a way that, and own it using I statements. I think, I feel, I want, I need, right? In a way that automatically takes people's defensive wall down.
It doesn't have to be adversarial.
It doesn't have to be. Yeah. Right. So it's a great example of how to listen. You can paraphrase it, but start with the word I. Yeah. If the minute I start with, you didn't read your facts right, and you don't understand, and that's just riling people up.
Yeah.
So,
but I think that's a helpful hint for those of us, all of us, who are going into this season, and this is October. We're headed into the holiday season. The outcome will be decided in November, but we still have Thanksgiving to go. We still have Christmas. We have New Year and beyond. And I think that's a helpful tool, is to recognize how it makes you feel and respond in kind, rather than inciting a situation that you're going to regret. We disagree with people all the time, and we agree with people all the time. It was funny. I told my husband what our podcast was about this morning, and he goes, "Oh boy." He said, "Are you wearing purple?" And I said, "No, I'm not." But I said, it's just how people write each other off. And he said, it's crazy. And this is my husband speaking, not me. But he made a really good point. He said, much like you wouldn't, if you have somebody who you absolutely despise and they're a horrible human being, and he used the example of Charles Manson. Just because Charles Manson agrees with your political opinion doesn't mean that Charles Manson automatically becomes your friend. Same is true if you have a family member who you love, who disagrees with you. They shouldn't automatically become your enemy, because the relationships are much more complex. So you may choose the conversations you have with that family member, but it doesn't make them your enemy because you don't agree. The same as it doesn't make Charles Manson your friend because he agrees with you.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to responsibility. To Michael's point, I think recently my husband and his siblings had a group chat going on, and politics came up, and they got a little heated. And after it was over, my husband texted his sister and said, "I still love you," and she said, "I still love you." So, it is possible to have that disagreement and come to the table and say, okay, let's set that aside.
Actually, that's important, because like we said at the beginning, we're not telling you not to have conversations. I would say be mindful when you have them, accept responsibility for them, know that you're responsible for what comes out of your mouth or what you put on the page, but be willing to recognize the relationship that you have with your loved one or your neighbor or your friend, and be willing to take responsibility then to say, hey, I'm sorry that I upset you. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. And oh, by the way, I love you. Now, in my family, we'd probably add something extra to that, but I love you. But I think that's important. It doesn't mean you can't come back from it either, right? Like, it doesn't mean you can't come back from an argument.
Well, right. And at the end of the day, I guess my thought is, whether I vote for Harris or Trump, neither one of them is going to have breakfast with me tomorrow morning and be my friend. I need friends and family who are going to walk through life with me. It doesn't matter who I vote for or who becomes president. They're not going to be that person for me.
No.
So I need supports. And I don't want to alienate or estrange really good people because of this. Life is short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So I want to come back to a point a little bit ago, Amie and Jody. This was right as you were writing down the word fear on your notes. Mm-hmm. Amie had just made a point about someone's behavior being unhealthy. And so I kind of want to pivot on this one a little bit and say, if you are a person who perhaps is seeing someone close to you who has unhealthy behavior, who is, I think that word is so key, fear. There's a reason why we're all kind of coming back to that. This could be a really hard time to try to talk to somebody and be like, you're being kind of a jerk, or whatever the case may be.
That is not an I statement.
You're not acting like yourself. This isn't, you are. And so fear may be rooted in that. So I want to kind of pivot to a point of trying to talk to somebody when they are a little revved up, or you did see something that they just posted that was like, whoa, like, have your opinion. But so I kind of want to pivot there. If you see somebody that you feel you understand that maybe they are reacting out of fear of the things that they can't control, that can be a really difficult conversation to have somebody in that, especially because there's not going to be a definitive answer to what this might be until November. So this is something that may be sitting on somebody's shoulders for a little bit of time. Jody, I'll go ahead and start with you. That idea of trying to talk to a kettle that's already whistling a little bit on the stovetop.
I think you need to make sure you're the right person to ask that question. So I think that's first. If you are not the right person, you need to find the person who is the right person. And I'll just say, if someone puts something out there and you disagree with what they put out there and they know you disagree, you're probably not the right person to reach out to him or her to say anything, because it may not be heard. If you are the right person, I would simply start with, I wanted to check on you. I want to make sure that you are okay. And they might say, why? And then your response is, I saw what you posted and it concerned me, and I just want to make sure you're okay. And I'm here for you if you need anything.
Yeah, and I think you can even preface that by saying, okay, politics aside, I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
So that it's not a, hey, I saw what you posted and I'm concerned. Yeah. I mean, that might just, but you're if right. I say, listen, politics aside, friend to friend, human to human, I'm worried about you. Are you okay? I think that's a great way, to let somebody know that, hey, I see you, I hear you, and I'm a little scared for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it allows that person then to say, no, I'm good. I just thought everybody needed to see that.
Right.
Okay, that's cool. But I do think checking in with those individuals in a non-confrontational way, as long as you're the right person to do it, and finding someone who is the right person to do it. I do think we need to check on one another right now. This is a really scary time for a lot of individuals for all sorts of reasons. No matter what, it's really, it's polarizing. And let's not forget that we also live in a world where those profiting from clicks and listens and, turning a channel, every single one of those is profit driven. So just be mindful that when you're reading or receiving information, that there's a motive behind that as well. Like, you just in the back of your mind, go, oh, this person's getting paid. But yeah, this should not, and it can be, much like any difference of opinion. Parenting, you mentioned parenting. I mean, how many times have individuals who are listening to this been sitting at a dining room table and you disagree with the way your brother or sister or cousin parents their children? It's none of your business. It's simply none of your business. Don't get in it. So there are times when I think you just don't get in it.
Well, right. And I think that was your other question, Crockett, earlier, is when do you just back off, or when do you walk away, and how do you know when to do that? So.
I've already said to someone when they've made a statement, I've already said, are you looking to have a conversation? Like, do you want to talk about this? Because if you want to talk about it, I'm happily here to talk about it.
I've got this boat I'd love to talk to you on if you want to come join me on.
But truly, like, did you just need to say it? Because if you just need to say it and I needed to hear it, great. And I'm not perfect at this. Let me be perfectly honest. I mean, that was a big maturation step for me last weekend when 2 weekends ago when that happened. But I do think you realize afterwards, it's like, thank goodness I didn't say something.
Yeah.
Sure.
Goodness. I even told my daughter, I just want to let you know, I want you to recognize your mother's restraint. And to which she looked at me and she said, that would have been so stupid if you would have said anything, Mom. And she's right.
I told you not to bring your brass knuckles on the boat, Mom. But I'm happy you didn't use them.
It was a koozie.
One of the phrases that I love that we use with, in particular, our son is 4, and his emotions are that of a 4-year-old. They're all over the place. And one of the things that I love that we say to him are, your feelings are valid, your behavior is not. And so I think I'm not saying that anybody is not acting their age. I'm just saying that you're fine to feel how you want to feel and believe in what you want to believe in. There's an appropriate way to maybe express those feelings. And then there's some that maybe you should be like, okay, to your point, take 5 seconds and just jump in the water and you'll feel better about it later. So maybe that's something that all of us can kind of take away from this conversation today. The other thing that I took away from this conversation today is, while the candidates won't be having breakfast with you, Amie, Jody and I would anytime, as long as you guys are buying. That's fine with me.
I will say this, Crockett, on the note of breakfast. Amie introduced me to, and I know we can't say the name because we're not being sponsored by anyone, but about a year and a half ago, Amie introduced me to the best hash browns or tater tots I've ever had in my life. And they're really close by our studio. So I think we should go there and have the best tater tots I've ever had in my life. And if you could secure a sponsorship, I just might name drop if I could actually remember the name.
As long as you guys are fine with changing this into the Just Start the Conversation with
Tater
Hash
Tots
Browns podcast, maybe we can make that work.
I'm not opposed.
Listen, if neither of the candidates will have breakfast with us, the 3 of us can go separately.
Fair. Okay.
There we go. Okay. There we go. And it sounds like we've got a spot to do it. This is the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation Mental Health Services. You can visit pennfoundation.org. Jody, McCloud, Missmer, Amie, Alanson, Dundon. In all seriousness, always great to have a conversation. Listen, this is a conversation that people are going to be having. I'm certainly glad I got to have this conversation with you. So thank you, as always, for your insight. It is certainly appreciated. So thank you.
Thanks, Crockett.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast.